I feel like since I've learned about Goodyear, my mind has been opened as far as like what poetry can be. As someone who's written poetry for a while, I've always thought of poetry as okay, let's write some words on a paper and then like stash it away, maybe get it published, whatever. But I had never done any readings before. I hadn't really considered like I know poetry as an art form, but I didn't consider myself an artist. As a result of being connected to Goodyear, what Goodyear has done, and being involved in some of their events, I've had a more expansive view of what is possible. So, poetry is my primary medium, but through this opportunity as a resident at Goodyear, I've been delving deeper into genealogy, of course, actually pushing my poetry forward, right? I'm trying out different poetic forms. I usually resist forms, but I'm trying some new forms to see how things work out with that. And I'm also bringing in for the first time tea blending. I started blending teas a few years ago. I just got really interested in what tea could be. So in my study of that, I've been studying about techniques in terms of meditating with tea and using tea as a mindfulness practice. So the residency gave me time and the space to explore, right? I got these huge walls to be able to just put stuff on the walls, figure things out, look at my great and great great grandmas like every single time I was in my studio. Gave me an opportunity to experiment with my poetry to try to push the bounds of what I normally do with my poetry and just go for it, just to incorporate methods of using ekphrastic work, incorporate using different forms that I wasn't used to using. I also love that I was in a space that I could call mine. That I could close the door if I wanted to and just sit down and just write, listen to music, or just listen to those oral history interviews over and over and over again. Um, so yeah, so it was. I felt like every single time I came to the studio, it, I guess, reinvigorated me, so to speak, because I was surrounded by these objects that I was using to associate with my grandmothers and to also see their faces every single day.
Wonderful.
I was just gonna play the guitar, and then I had some ideas about like, uh, well, I had initial ideas about like memory and stuff, and that sort of started informing like, well, maybe I should use some other mediums that like maybe naturally degrade or something, or I should find a way to, um, I don't know, make that make just convey it in different ways, and I started using some old tape players and tape machines to record some stuff, and I think I've described it as like um just grief informed stuff. It's like it's very specifically about my mother, who we lost a couple years ago, and I kind of got as I was applying for the residency, got kind of obsessed with the idea that like you know my sense of grief is only getting better because I'm forgetting her. Like she's getting further and further away from like a corporeal person, I mean, having 24/7 access to Goodyear was definitely like a huge boon because I work weird hours, and um so I mean that really is the biggest one for me, being able to come in, at 11 p.m. or, 10 in the morning is has been a huge boon to that, because it can be, I'm sure this, when sometimes when an idea happens, it's like I have an hour to do something about this before it's gone forever. You know what I mean? Or I start thinking about it too much, and I let it lose its integrity or something.
The poems are
three different stories of what I want the West Side to be, what I want people who not from here to get from the West Side, and what I want people to remember when the West Side I know is long gone. Because there's still remembrance of it here, but it's disappearing. Poppin', pop, what's poppin'? Pop, 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 pop. I think his name might have been Kabar. I branched so far out. Like I didn't realize I was gonna branch so far out. Like I did the poems, and I'm like, the poems can just be it. Like, but like I want to do more. So like, I had the idea for it to make like a video to accompany the poems. And then my brain just was like, yo, what if I did these mirror things with the maps to like go along with the story I'm telling and have something that can exist here long after the poems are gone and like it's something physically to exist from it. So I'm like, wow. The main thing that it seems so simple, right? But the main thing was just to have a space. Like it's just something that like I'm not used to. Like as a poet, you write wherever. Like and even if like I get contracted to do a poem here, do a set here, do whatever. Like when I'm working on it, yeah, I do it wherever I can. And I don't live alone and I don't have an office and I don't have like a space that's mine. So like having the space and be like, this is my space. Who can come in is only by invitation. I got a key. I can lock it up. I can like this is my space. That was like something that was like so very important to creating. I didn't know any of that existed, so yeah.
Maybe there's some clips to the
Those
text.
meetings where we all get together and we all go to each other's studio and seeing how everybody else works. Like my space is like real like tight. I only work at this desk, so everything's on the desk and it's not really like a lot going on when you walk in here and then go into Olivia's, you see everything on the wall spread out and the tea set up and then going to Rusty's and Rusty's writing on the walls and it's just seeing all three of our practices and how we're applying it and how we're making use of the space and also being able to get inspiration from each other's work like seeing the way Olivia's poems were formatted. I was like, oh, I need to do some edits. And seeing like certain lines that Rusty had written on the walls, I'm like, that's so interesting that that's connected to a point he hasn't even heard. I should probably build on that point, like in going back and tweaking poems after seeing their work. So that's probably my favorite part of this.
So I typically work in textile and fiber, and the way that I do it is more representative of fashion and fashion design. So I consider myself a fashion illustrator and designer who works at the precipice of high fashion and fine art. So I just love how those things kind of interplay and connect with one another. With this install and with this project particularly, I call it Last Street Laundry. And basically, it is inspired by my summers. I grew up, although I lived in Jersey by that time, I grew up in the summers down in Walmalaw Island, which is a small island just outside of Charleston. I think one of the really cool experiences that I specifically ran into, like, is I saw this residency as kind of like a turning point for myself in what I do, with it being at the convergence of high fashion and fine art. Like, I am looking to continue to have generative conversations about me as a fine artist, not just me as a designer. And so coming in here, I'm like, I'm gonna art them up with this thing. And so like I went into especially the first check-in and got to pitch it amongst legitimate artists that are in this sphere and began their work in this sphere and are not just like kind of people with a foot in two different worlds. And I realized how much I was overshooting what was a beautiful sweet spot for myself. Like I think I was like working against myself to make it like, oh, it's got to be super artistic in this way. And they're like, yeah, but it's super artistic the way that you're presenting it right now. And I'm like, wait, what, huh? You know, like just to know like that vote of confidence from people that are around you doing the thing that you really want to do and really want to continue sinking your teeth into is like it was a gift because I think it took a lot of pressure off of me really early on in like this whole experience that it didn't have to have this bell, that whistle, and the other three bells and those four whistles all at once happening. Because I think in that, had I not had those conversations or those experiences, I think it probably might have ended up really convoluted and probably lost a lot of the essence of what I wanted to infuse into it.
So I'm definitely exploring something new. I've always been really interested in installation as a medium, and I love film. And so lately I've been working with 16 millimeter film and painting on top of it, still using water soluble mediums like watercolor and ink. But that's kind of what I have ultimately been exploring this residency that's very brand new to me. I have definitely moved towards more abstraction, I think. And within my work, which is very figurative and sometimes very representational, um, I do like to abstract figures and all that. But I think recently I've kind of fallen in love with a more simple and direct way of representing my emotions. And I feel like my work deals with a lot of confronting the feeling of like alienation. So I think the great thing about this residency is that it's really given me a lot of freedom, I feel. I think there's kind of some kind of structure with art. A lot of the times, it's very commercial sometimes too. And you kind of start falling back into a routine sometimes with the things that you're making. And I feel like for me, I've had success in some of the stuff that I've made, and I, have had positive feedback, but it hasn't really pushed me to explore outside of that and further. I feel like I'm always learning new things, and I think with the residency, it's been allowing me to meet people who can guide me through those things. Like, I think that's the greatest thing about the residency is that I've met so many amazing and impressive people, and so getting the feedback from them and having a place to kind of exhibit is really amazing. But also just having the studio space and kind of hearing different stories and just ways to help motivate me. So that's kind of the thing that I really like about it is just being surrounded by people and communicating with people.
One of the things I love about theater as a art form is that I get to work on so many different kinds of stories, but they're always someone else's stories. And it's, it's the playwright's story and it's the director's vision of that. And it's the producer, what is the producer trying to achieve with it? And my part in that is to support all of those ideas. Um, as a puppet artist, I get to sort of say, this is the story I'm telling, and this is why I'm telling it, and this is the perspective of that. And it's kind of scary to be in control like that, but it's also really exciting. And that's why I've loved having this residency is it's really sort of given me the chance to go, here's a room, here's some space, here's some time, do something. Working on this project, I've written, I've researched, I've drawn and sketched, I've carved, I've built. And then for the last few days, me and the puppeteer crew have been sort of staging it and then sort of working through it as a group about how are we telling the story and how does this moment lead to that moment? And, I found many of the flaws in what I've done. But that's actually exciting because now I can go back after this and go, okay, these are some things I know I need to change. These are some things that I really want to explore more, or here's how I want this to proceed into something different. It's one of these. My general practice is as a scenic designer, so I'm used to dealing with architectural space. My puppetry work is where I do also trying to. This is the first residency I've ever done. Now I've done for years. I've worked with theater companies all over the country, and I'll work with them remotely, and then I'll be on site for 2 or 3 weeks while we actually get the project up. But they all follow a fairly similar structure, and here the structure was up to me. And I think sitting down at the top of it and saying, okay, here's how I want to do this. This first week is going to be about these steps. The second week is going to be about these. Uh, Third and fourth are going to be focusing on those items. And okay, fifth week, got to get this puppy together. And so it's a quicker process than what I'm used to as a theater artist. But I think having deadlines is how I work best, because I need that finish line. And it's one of the things. Sometimes you limp over the finish line. Sometimes you soar over it. Uh, but the fact is that the getting there, the journey is what counts. And so I feel like the journey has been incredibly successful. It's what will the final product be? Will it be perfect? Hell no, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be. But what I've already gotten out of it is exactly what I needed. And it's given me a chance to really sort of look at this particular story and this idea that was just sort of an on paper thing and go, okay, it has legs, but I need to consider these things about it. And like, okay, I can do that. I don't know when I'm going to do it next, but I can. And I now have something, in the documentation of something to a point where I can now share this with a potential producer or a company and say, okay, here's where I've gotten this to. Here's why you need to give me money in order to take this to the next level. And this is why this matters.
What is the experience of the body when you're feeling in conflict, when you're feeling misunderstood? What's physiologically happening in the body when you confront difference? And particularly the phenomenon of being like in these well-worn ruts of communication or miscommunication. And every time you enter into that situation, it's that moment plus every moment that you've been there before, right? So it's like your body experiences it all at once, and it's almost as if the two are no longer present in that moment, but they're in these separate realities and these ruts of communication that just spin. There's been a few ways that we've started to engage during the residency, and one is like very directly of doing journaling and thinking about personal experiences that relate to that, and just writing about it, thinking like connecting with words that come out of that writing, also just embodied memory of what does it feel like to be in that moment, and doing some improvisation around that and reflecting back to each other about what we're seeing and kind of witnessing that. And it's been a really special sort of vulnerable experience. I have really enjoyed having 3 rehearsals a week. That is not something that I've had the privilege, to do. And because of the stipend, I've been able to pay the dancers for that time, and that feels amazing to me. And so, yeah, the resources of space and time and and money have just like made a big difference. I mean, and to know that I can really focus on exploration, experimentation, creative process, and that's supported. Every time we had our sort of check-in meetings, I was kind of like, May didn't say this, but felt like, is it really okay? And Sarah and Eric were like, that's what you should be doing. So that felt amazing to have that understanding. And I think that being distinctively that it is a collective of artists who are creating these programs, that matters. And it made a difference, I think, because artists understand that process is important, and that dedicated time to experiment is important. And so that's been awesome. I've just loved it.
5 to 10 minutes of like sound contextualizes the piece.
Yeah.
We can hear it, and there's that's an explicit connection. I think that's what the question that
I had this
really is,
idea
how do we-
for quite a while. I mean, I have sketchbooks and sketchbooks full of different thoughts and different ways of doing it and different whatever. But I called it Sacred Space because I don't know, I wanted to pare it down to this square delineated space in which people could stop and maybe talk or listen or do whatever they want to do in it. But that was related to a small storybook that I read by Juan Munoz, which is currently I've been trying to find. It's in my storage unit somewhere, but there's a couple out there that are for sale. And I'm going to get one. But anyways, it's titled Segment. And it's just only about this big, and it has a vellum sheet over it where the segment is written inside the book on top, and you see through it, which I love that whole idea. I don't know, I felt like I was getting so tight about the space being controlled, this little piece, and I thought, well, every space is a sacred space when you think about it. If you keep pushing against the envelope. And also I was thinking, like this piece here, I actually thought, no wait, this one over here. That the middle of the space, I think it'd be really cool to put a piece in there. Linear, really tall, and saying that's a sacred space. But then I was thinking, well, the whole space is sacred, and they're just ordinary shots, as well as this one is just an ordinary shot. And that's I just want ordinary spaces to be special.
So wait, Terry, it becomes a box, right?
Yeah, it's a cube.
It's a cube. Yeah.
Working in here is really nice. The people are really friendly. I mean, Will was really supportive, and every time I forgot something, he'd say, "Here, I got one." He's always got everything. And it was nice to have him around because it was really empty, and I didn't really like being empty because I like people around.
Yeah. A lot of the work that I've done professionally has been film, and so over the last 2 decades, that's really been the work from video, film and art, experimental documentary, animation, things like that. But for the residency, I've sort of gone back to some like formative materials, literally inherited materials, but also, um, you know, painting, glue, paper, and other things that I've collected for, more than 20 years. And so kind of using these like pre-existing formative things in that way, it's been a going back and reusing them. And starting the residency, I wanted to re-envision what animation could be for me, and to play with the idea of time and space, of taking old materials and possessions and experiences and braiding them together, to where there's sort of a blended past and present that's happening, with the hopes that that could translate at least to some sort of intimacy to the audience. So I found out about Goodyear essentially at the start. I went to the second space. I knew some collective members who had been in it and who were starting then, kept following after, seeing, individual and collective works that were shared, watching it sort of grow and move to its current space through the pandemic, and, increase programming and kind of this like multi-pronged impact. So for me, watching that maturation, and now at 10 years with people who have been in 8, 9, 10 years in some cases, to see the evolution of themselves, maybe within, but sometimes, in a totally different field or in multiple areas of work. It's really inspiring. And I think just the idea that creatives are multifaceted, want to continue to grow in different ways, and for that to be this sort of beacon in a city that encourages that, whereas many times things can be much more siloed off.
community wise, but also maybe the type of work that's represented is just like, I don't think you can overstate the impact of something like that being there, because if it was gone, there would be this huge part of um, what Charlotte art not just is but can be would be gone.